Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I am your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Media. Today on the show, I am back from Thousand Oaks. I just went out and saw the Adidas Nations training camp. Got to see Tom Crean, got to catch up with him a little bit. He was out there coaching up the kids. It was great to see that man back in action. He runs a fantastic practice. And it was good to see a lot of these high school kids again. I will probably do a more in-depth high school recruiting kind of thing at some point, maybe with Scott Phillips, maybe with someone else. But today's episode is going to be a quick little recap and look into the future of NBA free agency. But also we've had two significant NBA events happen since we have last podcasted on Wednesday. As I promised Wednesday, our guest today is Dieter Kurtenbach of the recently deposed Fox Sports.
From DieterKurtenbach.com.
From Dieter Kurtenbach at Medium.com.
Yeah, pretty much. From my Twitter handle, much like the venerable Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue, I work for Twitter Sports now, though they're not aware of it.
Oh man! So we're here with Dieter today. We're going to talk Chris Paul. We're going to talk Phil Jackson, and we are going to talk NBA free agency. We're going to do a little bit of a review there. Dieter, how is it going, man? You just got back down to Los Angeles. We're going to get into some stuff this weekend, I'm sure, but what is going on with you? How are you feeling right now?
Feeling great. Legitimately, a lot of people, and I totally understand it. But the kindness that people have shown since everything went down at Fox, I think it was Monday, has just been immense and means the world to me to have so many people that I respect and in this industry and just as people reach out to me. So that's really meant a lot. But I'm really it's so strange, and you'll be the first to, I think, attest to this. When I had a job, all I could think about was how I was going to lose my job. And the second I don't have a job, I'm really optimistic about everything. It's a really strange thing. I'm like the most pessimistic person ever.
You really are.
And I'm now just like I don't know. I mean, listen, it's a scary time. I'm kind of going stir crazy because I'm not writing 5,000 word columns a day. It's probably best that I get that out of my system a little bit, and whatever this halfway house of a life I have right now is. But there's a lot of people have reached out, and I think there's a lot of really great opportunities out there. And you and I have talked about this both on the podcast and off the podcast. It's a really weird time. I don't want to put a judgment if it's a good time or a bad time in sports media, but my mindset right now when it comes to this is, okay, I know that I can get the job done in the present day, and I can make somebody money now. I'm worried about how I'm going to make money not only for a company but for myself in 2020, 2025, 2030, and beyond. And this is a really awesome opportunity for me to talk to a lot of really smart people who are a lot smarter than me, about what they think that media landscape is going to look like and how to best position myself for that. And I'm really excited about those conversations, and a lot of them have already happened. There's going to be just a shit ton more coming on in the future. And hopefully I'm able to heed a lot of really smart people's advice and put myself in a really good position. So I'm feeling good about it.
Yeah, no, the kindness that you get from people whenever you get laid off is incredible. The community of basketball writers and journalists in general, it's really remarkable, right? Like you really don't feel better at any point as a writer than when you get laid off, which is funny. Yeah. Like there's that day, right? Like where you announce it and you write it publicly and everything, and it comes out, and you really do just feel this wave of intense empathy almost for you. And it's really remarkable. I'm really very thankful for everyone that has continued to stay with me and that has, even people I don't know, people who are total strangers to me that reach out and constantly tell me, I have liked you since CBS. Like I read reviews on the podcast sometimes and they're like, I first listened to Sam like when he was on the CBS podcast with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander. This podcast is awesome, and I really appreciate everyone who has followed me from there to here. And it's the amount of people that stick with you once you build up a brand loyalty, which, you have, I have, a lot of people in this industry obviously have. It's really remarkable to me, and I'm really very thankful for it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I wish that we would do that more in the non-trying times. I guess every day in this industry is trying times, but sort of the rah-rah spirit of it. I would like to establish that I know everyone who didn't reach out to me, and that I will hold a grudge against them for the rest of my life. So, you win some, you lose some. But, the situation I have with Fox currently is complicated, and, you talked at me about it a little bit last time we did this, and then I took the floor for the next 2.5 hours, it seemed. But, at the same time, ultimately I can say this, and I don't think that I'm speaking out of turn or I'm going to jeopardize any future earnings here. It was a relief in many senses seeing what was going down in Playa Vista, where we were based for Fox Digital. That it's over. We all saw the writing on the wall for a long time that our money and our work wasn't valued, and I don't, again, agree with that decision, but that's not my decision to make, and it's a trying time. And I'm not going to say that I wish I wish a lot of people the best of luck there. I'm not going to say that I hope that the model succeeds. I feel extremely comfortable in my stance that it probably won't, but again, there's a lot of smart people theoretically working on it, and they have their convictions, and they know a lot more than me when it comes to certain aspects. I think that the biggest thing, it's been very interesting in one sense, and I'll try to keep it short. When it comes to the written word, it seems like we've come to this sort of almost political polarization when it comes to, like, it's the Twitter sphere, so take it with 1,000 grains of salt, but the written word versus digital and podcasts and video and all that stuff. And I just find it so narrow and ignorant, I think is the right word for it. It is probably a more succinct term for it, because ignorance is a pretty broad term. But, use the medium that's going to best serve the audience. And so long as you have interesting ideas and you serve the audience, you're going to have one. And so long as you have an audience, you're going to make money. People are always going to want to talk about sports. People are always going to want information about sports. People will crave good analysis about sports. And it doesn't matter if it's a podcast, a video, or if we're, putting it intravenously through, a needle. It's people are going to want it. And I think that limiting any medium and taking bullets out of your gun in a time that you don't want to do that. The last thing in the world is you want to do that. I think it is very narrow, and ideas will win out. So let's get into some ideas.
Well, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And, I think a lot of people are kind of lumping podcasts in with video when I kind of feel it's the exact opposite, right? Like a good podcast to me goes highly in depth, and it goes into this place that, a short video, which is really the model right now for video, plays, so that you can run as many of them as possible. That kind of model doesn't really do the same thing, right? Like it doesn't go into the depth of knowledge that a good article does, that a good podcast does. And I find it very interesting that people kind of don't differentiate between the two. It's a fascinating time for the industry, like you said.
It's not that fascinating, though, Sam. I ultimately think it's new, so therefore people think that they can sell it better than they can sell the old thing. And, that facade will crumble. I mean, podcasts are so much more long-form than anything I wrote at Fox Sports.
Yeah.
And in these videos, I've done a 5-minute video that's gotten full retention. It's one of those things of, I want to say this, I'm 28, you're a little older than me, but, it's
hey.
a little. Your hairline.
27. No.
Yeah,
I'm 1 year
Sam,
younger.
That is fucking insane. Sam, you got to take better care of yourself, buddy. To be fair, I look like I'm 12. I have the body of a 40-year-old and the temperament of a 70-year-old. So no one really knows where I fall on that spectrum.
I was going to say, in terms of like staying in shape, right now I'm not because I'm not because it's draft time. But like most of the time, I'm fine. Like in terms of that.
True. That's true. I've seen you in those Nike quarter zips with the little sleeves that you got going on, which I have bought two now. I thought they were so stylish, and you look so fit in them. So
the quarter zips are clutch. Here's the thing. Ultimately, it's all going to depend on, you just got to find the niche that the audience wants. And
totally.
to me, they want as much content as possible. They want as much, playmaking ability as possible, essentially, right? To kind of
seems like a segue, Sam.
It does seem like a segue because it is, Dieter. We're going to go to this Chris Paul trade, right? Chris Paul ends up becoming a member of the Houston Rockets. He was set for free agency. Dieter and I didn't talk about him on Wednesday, thinking that we were going to talk about him today. Ultimately, we were just a day too late, right? Chris Paul gets traded for Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, a first-round pick, and then a few cap dumps, essentially, that, Daryl Morey acquired throughout the day. He was hoarding them. I think that it might have been like Kevin Pelton who said he was hoarding them like a squirrel hoards nuts. He has these non-guaranteed contracts now that he can just attach on to, make the money work on all of these deals. The key for all of this is for people that are wondering why this deal was not consummated after July 1st, when it actually would have been a little bit easier monetarily to make it work. By doing it before July 1st, Houston allows itself to stay over the salary cap, which gives them the ability to utilize their full mid-level exception, which is around $8.4 million this year, as well as their biannual exception, which is right around $3 million. So it really allows them to be able to fill out their roster with two extra players that hopefully are going to be pretty high-level players, I think, for the Houston Rockets. So your initial reaction to this trade, what was kind of going down in your brain whenever it happened? Because I know that you, like me, did not think that Chris Paul was going to leave $52 million on the table, but in reality, he's really not doing that here.
Yeah, that. My first thought is, Chris Paul, you cheeky bastard, because this is some next level maneuvering. I do not have the encyclopedic knowledge that many do. I know who I would reference to ask if this has been done before, but the new CBA is made it really difficult to do sign-in trades, and that was deliberate. I mean, there were so many sign-in trades, and under the last CBA that the NBA just said we can't do that anymore. It's not, the owners don't want to do that anymore because it just puts them over a barrel, and they have to agree to it. Chris Paul doing the opt-in trade, which I guess is technically a sign-in trade, is borderline genius. And it still lines him up to get that $200 million next year. It helped out the Clippers, all things considered, because they got 7 assets and a first-round pick.
So it kind of helped out the Clippers.
Well, better than nothing. You can't divide by zero.
Right. It's certainly better than losing Chris Paul for nothing. Ultimately, they would very clearly be better off keeping Chris Paul, right? I don't think anyone denies that. Can we talk about Chris Paul's genius here, first and foremost?
Yeah, I think that really needs to be hit. Everyone's trying to spin it forward, and listen, we'll get there. But Chris Paul opting in, getting that 5th year that he was already going to have with the Clippers, and then setting himself up for the 201. This is why this guy was elected to be the head of the Players Association. This is why it seems like he's had this move going for years. He changed it from 36 to 38 with the contract rule.
That's the point that I want to hit.
It's just like Chris Paul was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers with this. And as soon as it went down, I'm just like, God damn, Chris Paul, you have outsmarted us all again.
Yeah, so Chris Paul ends up the president of the Players Association, like Dieter said. He is the leader of, the negotiations. Really, it's Michelle Roberts, but Michelle Roberts clearly takes cues from the players, right? And one of the things that the players wanted, led by Chris Paul, was a change from the over 36 rule to the over 38 rule. What that means is that you can't really sign long-term contracts past a certain age, right? And by changing it from 36 to 38, Chris Paul allows himself to be able to get the max contract that he was able to get this summer, right? Everyone was thinking, oh, he'll just sign the max contract this summer and, it'll be fine. But he was going to be 36 in that final year of the contract. What people didn't necessarily recognize, and including myself, including many people out there that are smarter than I am to be sure, they didn't realize that by moving it 2 years, he also sets himself up for the ability to opt in, get traded, and then end up being able to sign the same contract next summer, and actually
which would end at age 37.
Which would end at age 37. So
right under the cut. It's unbelievable.
Chris Paul is not just playing chess while Phil Jackson is playing
Phil Jackson
shapes. Really?
Shapes. Yeah, well, that is the name of my upcoming New York Knicks book. Phil Jackson Shapes.
Yeah. While Phil Jackson is sitting in the corner trying to figure out how to make the star figure fit into the hole that fits the star, Chris Paul is over here.
The circle.
Yes, Chris Paul is over here creating a situation where he is going to set himself up to make even more money than anyone thought was going to be humanly possible for him. He can make up to, I believe, $227 million over the course of the next 6 years. Now, having said all of this, the question is, will Houston be willing to go to the max next year? The rumor is on the Los Angeles side that there was some chafing in terms of whether or not they were going to be willing to do the full 5-year max for Chris Paul. I find it hard to believe
they would have gotten there.
If
there's no way they wouldn't have gotten there.
Right. If Chris says, I'm willing to come back only if you do this, it's really difficult for me to believe that they're going to say no. If it's a choice between Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, you pick Chris Paul. It's either a 36-year-old Chris Paul getting paid $43 million or a Blake Griffin who has missed 50 games in 2 of the last 3 seasons or so. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, something like 50 games or so in 2 of the last 3 seasons.
And let's establish there that the Clippers had to think to themselves, okay, we don't want to give Chris Paul the full thing because he is going to be old. Okay, so that's their stipulation. Everything else, they're like, listen, Chris Paul's worth every penny. The Clippers have been pretty damn good without Blake Griffin. And they were definitely thinking that when it came to negotiation. That I have on authority. That, listen, Blake Griffin is younger, but he's pretty position locked. Not necessarily I think he's done a wonderful job in adapting his game to the modern NBA, but he's not exactly positionless. And this is a guy who has a history of injuries, whereas Chris Paul's injuries are mostly freak injuries that don't seem to have a lingering effect year to year. And going and signing both of those guys to maxes with DeAndre Jordan then coming up the next year, we knew the ceiling with that core 3. And they're not going to get, and they weren't going to contend any more in the next 5 years or whatever than they were in the previous 3 or 4 years. And Chris Paul had to see that coming. This is his last go-around before he ends up just being a total ring chaser. He's never been to the conference finals. And frankly, I think he made a really good choice in going to Houston because, it's a little bit subversive. He could have gone to San Antonio and taken less money. He didn't have to make the sacrifice of playing for a lesser team to get more money.
Right.
He's going to play for a team that I don't think is truly a contender, but is at least now more significantly part of that conversation, and he's going to get all the money. That is an expert move.
Right. So Blake Griffin, for what it's worth, he missed 50 games in 2016. He missed 15 in 2015, missed about 21 plus a playoff series for the most part this year. That's right around, what we estimated in terms of what his losses have been. It's also very... So they're going to have to almost 5-year max Blake Griffin at this stage if they want to stay relevant, right?
That's the question. What do the Clippers want to do? I mean, it's just going in a lot of ways, and I have a theory that I'll get to.
If you don't get Blake Griffin, then you are essentially trading DeAndre Jordan then, because there's just no circumstance where you let DeAndre Jordan get into player option mode next summer whenever he doesn't even have a point guard on this roster really outside of Juwan Evans. By the way, the fact that the Clippers have Austin Rivers, Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford all on the same team is going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. But before we get there, there's just no chance that they're going to let that situation fester. There are a lot of teams out there that would be happy, willing, and able to go out and sign DeAndre Jordan, who really has turned himself into one of the 5 best centers in the NBA.
What does that mean anymore? I mean, what is that center market like? And I think that's the real kicker.
For him, I think it's actually going to be really strong. He's won. Okay. He's been All NBA 2 of the last 3 years.
I like DeAndre Jordan, but
for elite level centers, I think it's different. For your mid-level center, which by the way we've now seen Brook Lopez, Tim Mozgov, Dwight Howard, Miles Plumlee all get traded this summer. So maybe there is something of a center market, but with guys that are elite that can start on every team, but 3 or 4 in the NBA. There's a market there, No,
I don't disagree that there's a market. I just don't think it might. I'm not totally convinced that when DeAndre Jordan, if he hits the market again after next season, that it would be a guaranteed full max like last time. I'm not certain of that.
Well, the thing about DeAndre is, so will he be a 10-year vet or a 9-year vet at that stage? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9. So he would actually be a 10-year vet at that, which is crazy.
You're not giving DeAndre. I mean, I'm not giving DeAndre Jordan $200 million.
Well, I was going to say by the virtue that he would be, if he would have been a 9-year veteran, he actually would have been eligible for 35% of the cap by the designated veteran player extension rule because he's made All NBA 2 of the last 3 years. I think I agree with you on your initial premise that Blake Griffin, that the Clippers have to max out Blake Griffin. And they should.
And they should, because, again, this is a team that can't tank. They are not in a position...
Oh, no, they really can't.
They are so cap-strapped as is. The roster is garbage around that core 3, one of which, and the best of which, is gone now. And they want to be players in next year's not so great, but at least it's something, free agent market. And I think, honestly, given the state of that franchise right now, I say you max out Blake Griffin, you get the framework of a deal with DeAndre done, try to get it done ahead of time. And I take a lot of these assets that you got for that the Clippers got for Chris Paul, and I go after Paul George, and if it fails after a year, you're really not in any worse of a position than you were going into, without him, because ultimately, we know that Paul George wants to go to LA. Everyone knows that he really wants to go to the Lakers, but the only way that the LA Clippers are going to get a guy like Paul George is to get him in and recruit him. And with all of these, with 7 assets, and I know a lot of them are going to be bought out and stuff, I think that you can make the Pacers a pretty interesting offer. And now we're dealing with a really kind of impressive, you got nobody else on the team, but you have a pretty impressive 5-4-3 there. And then you can go into free agency next year thinking, we think we did enough to keep Paul George here in LA, and we can probably add somebody else if we were aggressive enough with DeAndre and got him at less than market to play point guard. It's a wild hair up the ass theory. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but you might as well go for it at this point.
Well, so here's the issue: if the Boston Celtics get Gordon Hayward, I think that they're going to offer Indiana what they need for Paul George at that stage.
I don't disagree with that.
If the Celtics decide to put their assets on the table here, there's just nothing the Clippers can do, right? They just don't.
No, the Clippers are not going to throw anywhere near the best deal out there. There's a few teams that can jump them in line, but this situation. Who the hell knows what's going on with Boston? I'm still of the thought that Gordon Hayward's a 50-50, and if that doesn't happen, then things get weird there quick. And I'm just not sure what that trade market for Paul George is right now, and I think it would behoove the Clippers to make an aggressive move to try to get some talent in there this year so that, they can get into that free agency class next year with something to recruit players, because with just Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan as a pending free agent, I mean, and Austin Rivers and Doc and all that, like, why the hell would anyone want to go there? Because they're going to be, they're the Oklahoma City Thunder in a bigger market.
Yeah, the Austin Rivers, Chris Paul rumored, strife was pretty funny to me. I will
totally
say that as well.
Too. I mean, that's been floating around for a while now, and no one on that team likes Austin. And maybe there's a couple of guys; they're not important. And Doc has an amazingly boisterous personality, and sometimes big personalities don't get along with big personalities just for the sake of there's only so much air in one room.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point. Let's talk about Chris Paul and James Harden together. For me, I have extremely high expectations, maybe too high expectations, possibly.
Well, how high are these expectations, Sam?
I think that it is plausible that they could be the best backcourt in the last, 30 years.
By what metric?
So, in terms of offense and MVP finishes, they have 7 combined top 5 MVP finishes. Right.
And that's nice. That's nice and all, but all of those win shares that they've accumulated it on different courts with different teams. There's only one ball, and at risk of sounding like somebody who thought that the Golden State Warriors weren't going to work because Kevin Durant joined the team last year, I'm very optimistic about this Rockets team. But again, I just don't think that we can expect similar outcomes from both players now that they're on the same squad. It's a whole different kettle of fish.
I agree to an extent.
Okay.
So if it was any other coach, I would be a little bit scared.
That's a valid point.
But the fact that it's Mike D'Antoni, who I think will probably play these guys, 30 to 35 minutes. He'll make sure and stagger them to where they get their own time. Realistically, you can play half the game with them, apart, right? In the other half of the game, I actually kind of like the way they fit together, because both of them, and I think this is a place where Chris Paul has been remarkably underrated throughout his career, both of them are hyper elite jump shooters. Not just like Chris Paul is a good jump shooter. Chris Paul is a super elite jump shooter. If you look back throughout the last decade, really, where the 3-point shot has really exploded, right? Mm-hmm. There have been something like 23 player seasons where a player has made 39% of his threes on over 300 attempts.
Yeah.
Chris Paul is one of 4 players to have 2 or more of those seasons. The other 3 are Stephen Curry, Kyrie Irving, and I can't remember who the other one is. But he's done it in 2 of the last 3 seasons, right? He is a remarkably ridiculous shooter, and he's remarkably efficient offensively, too, where Matt Femright, who writes for Nylon Calculus, sent me a thing where he was over 60% at the rim, which is really good, over 50% between 3 and 10 feet, over 50% between 10 and 16, over 50% between 16 and the 3-point line, and then over 40% from the 3-point line and back last year. He went 60, 50, 50, 50, 40. That is just ridiculous to me that you can be that efficient all over the goddamn basketball floor. He is just his own beast, and I don't think that enough people recognize how dominant he was at the beginning of this season. He was legitimately 100%. One of the 5 best players in the NBA.
Oh yeah, not even a question. Right. There was a point when he was the best player in the NBA.
Right, and for me, he is absolutely a top 7 player in the NBA. For me, it is KD and Steph, LeBron and Kawhi, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Chris Paul. That 7.
That seems fair to me.
Those are your 7 guys in the NBA, and the fact that 2 of those 7 players are going to play in the same backcourt, that is outrageous to me. Can you remember a backcourt where 2 of the top 7 players played point guard and shooting guard in the NBA?
No, but we're also in a different era of the NBA. I mean,
it should I will say this, theoretically, it should be harder to get these guys together in this NBA.
Oh, no. And that has nothing, it should be. It really should. And it takes some, expert level genius to make this happen. And Chris Paul has proven to be that. I would argue, where Kevin Durant is a front court player technically, but him and Steph Curry on the same team balancing out. Like in this era of positionless basketball where there's a center and 4 guys standing around the center, I just don't put too much stock in sort of the standard 1 through 5 positions. That said, I think a lot of people are concerned, or at least let's just call it a borderline intrigue, about how James Harden, who was incredible last year as the primary ball handler and point guard for the Rockets, a new position for him effectively.
Right.
It is going to look now that you have brought the preeminent point guard in the NBA, and I won't equivocate on that statement, into handle it. And I think I agree with you 100%. Chris Paul is such a great shooter, and he is so much better off the ball than people give him credit for. They just remember him on the ball. But he is excellent off the ball in those rare times in Los Angeles where they had someone else who could actually handle the damn ball.
But it's the same with James Harden.
Yes. No, James Harden was a shooting guard for the majority of his career who was just an excellent passer, and the Rockets are like, screw it, let's do it with Harden. And we saw what happened at the end of last year. The guy wore down. They relied too much on him to create offense almost single-handedly with 4 guys spaced around him. Yep. And eventually he broke. And I'll still hold his feet to the fire. I mean, he's got to pace himself better in the regular season. He has to, he needs to rise to the occasion when the Rockets needed him there. At the same time, I understand that he ran out of gas in that scenario. This is great because I thought that the most important thing for the Rockets going into this offseason, and I thought it would be Blake Griffin, to be honest, if any of the 2 Clippers went to Houston. I thought him and Harden would have been just unbelievable together on a 1-4 pick and roll. But this is giving the Rockets what they really needed, which is another kind of smoke that they can not only throw at teams in the regular season, but then they have for the playoffs, which means that they have better legs for the playoffs.
Well, there's that. Yeah. There's also the fact that everyone makes a lot of the fact that, the Houston Rockets really like to shoot threes and get layups. The result of that
them immediately.
Right. The result of that is an incredibly well-spaced floor. Do you know who's going to eat in the mid-range now because of that well-spaced floor?
The guy who's like the best mid-range guard in the NBA?
Yes. He is going to eat next season in the mid-range. To me, it is just an outrageous fit together. I certainly think that you can make the argument that Steph and Klay fit better together and therefore are a slightly better backcourt.
And let's also establish defense does matter here. And while Chris Paul is an all-world defender,
right?
Those legs aren't where they were, and the spacing goes both ways. And
it does. No, 100%.
Yeah, Chris Paul is going to have to work probably harder on the defensive end of the floor. And I think Clint Capella is a nice player, but if Ryan Anderson's on the court, I mean, he's going to have to guard 2 guys at one time, and he's just not very big. But they're going to put up 130 points per game.
Yep.
They might give up 130 points per game on average, but they're going to put up some numbers. And
here's the thing, though. Like, Chris Paul is ostensibly a better defender than Patrick Beverley. Like,
okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe
I like Beverly's. This is minutiae. I really like.
It is. They're close, but like
tenaciousness in that defense. I thought that his ability to really get up into the chests of opposing point guards gave the rest of the Rockets a little bit of respite. Whereas I think Chris Paul is more of a cerebral defender, and that's not going to lend itself all that well to being terrible defenders. But again,
that's a good point.
I agree with your sentiment on the whole. Yeah, they're similar, and I would argue that Chris Paul is better.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really, really good point. Now that I think about it, let's move on and talk about Phil Jackson. The NBA's Jack Barker is gone, folks. For those of you who watch Silicon Valley,
these are world-class puns. Now I got nothing.
I am so incredibly disappointed, down to the goddamn triangles too, Dieter. Like
it's amazing, the conjoined triangles of success.
Yeah, like Phil Jackson is essentially running out like, I think Jack Barker was essentially created as an amalgamation of Phil Jackson and like a ridiculous Silicon Valley CEO.
Dolan has dropped him off in Jackson Hole, which is slightly out of the way.
Well, hey, Montana is where Phil Jackson's going. God knows we know that. Let's kind of rehash this real quick. Phil Jackson was maybe the worst general manager in the NBA. There are some out there that certainly are in that argument with him, I will say, but he has just been so remarkably terrible in his tenure in New York. He got one decision right, and it really paved over a lot of the problems. Whenever you get a 7'3" Latvian who can shoot threes and block shots like he can, who is putting up legitimately Hall of Fame indicating numbers over the course of his first 2 years, that shores up a lot of holes. He did literally nothing else right, and
okay. Let's get this out of the way. I think he's actually drafted fairly decently.
Yeah. How much?
Irving Gomez is a pretty good player.
So here is what I will say to that. No one has ever seen Phil Jackson over in Europe, like scouting these kids, and like all of these kids that are good that he has somehow found, like Mindaugas Kuzminskis, Willie Hernan Gomez, they're all European. Like, let's.
So this might be the only guys that Phil Jackson hasn't touched are the ones that turn out okay.
Yeah, let's shoot Clarence Gaines a nice solid thumbs up for the Phil Jackson success that happened here. No, I mean, Phil Jackson was a joke in New York. Charlie Rosen is a joke for trying to defend Phil Jackson in his time in New York. He wrote just a fucking embarrassing article over at FanRag where he, called Kristaps Porzingis a prima donna. He was trying to defend all of the moves that he did. He even tried to defend the Joakim Noah contract, which is indefensible right now at this stage. It is legitimately the worst contract in the NBA. Nothing that Phil Jackson...
I would like to say that the Pistons are still paying Josh Smith.
Yeah, but they're only paying him $5 million, so it's a year for the next 40, but it's fine.
Valid play.
$5 million is much better than 18 for the next 3.
That's how much they're paying him.
Yeah, he got a 4-year, $72 million deal. It's hilarious.
Early in free agency too.
Oh no, it was done before free agency. Is the craziest thing. They're like triangle, Joakim Noah passing. Let's do it.
I did love Joakim Noah when Derrick Rose went down that 1 year in Chicago and they just ran the offense through Noah. That was one of my favorite Bulls seasons, but
not anymore.
What an era! What a short-lived and ultimately unreplicable era of basketball that was.
My favorite thing that happened in this Charlie Rosen article, and for people who don't know who Charlie Rosen is...
You're really going in on Charlie Rosen.
I'm going in on this. The worst thing in that article, for people who don't know who Charlie Rosen is, Charlie Rosen coached with Phil Jackson, literally wrote the book on Phil Jackson. They've been friends for years. He is known to be like Phil Jackson's mouthpiece in a way in the media.
Known to be, I think, is a very light way of saying that.
Yes, I will.
He is Phil Jackson's mouthpiece. Let's say it definitively. That's exactly what he is. His role in the ecosystem is to speak to Phil Jackson and then recite what Phil Jackson tells him as if it was his own words.
And then right throughout the article, I haven't yet talked to Phil. But
he's definitely not my source, though. No.
He called Tyson Chandler a malcontent.
I mean, that only Phil Jackson uses that word. I mean, you're just giving it away now.
Yeah, but anyone who knows Tyson Chandler in the NBA, and I'm not going to say
he's like one of the class. I mean, I know that class is a coded word and all, but Tyson Chandler is upstanding citizen number one.
Right, everyone who I have ever spoken with that has dealt with Tyson Chandler, I have not gotten a chance to deal with him personally, but anyone in the NBA who has dealt with Tyson Chandler will say that he's a good dude. He is always going to work his ass off. He's going to make sure that he gets the best results that he's capable of, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and he's calling him a malcontent and stuff. This is what Phil Jackson did throughout his tenure, and it is bullshit. He decides to talk shit about Kristaps Porzingis, and like I talked about on this podcast, I think last week whenever that whole shit went down, I talked to NBA teams, what Phil Jackson was asking for and what the Knicks were asking for Porzingis. based on those asking prices, it's very clear that they never were going to trade Porzingis.
Right. No, that was I think the one thing that was really underreported about all of that. Like they were, it was almost to Phil Jackson's credit. I mean, there was this undercurrent of people who actually knew what the offers they were asking for was, and it's just like, well, listen, if Phil could get that, I don't think anyone would deny that trade just because they need to get a lot better in a lot of different ways. And if you cash in your most valuable asset and are able to get 25 cents on top of your dollar, that's pretty damn good. But they were never going to trade him because no one was ever going to give it up for Kristaps Porzingis, no matter how good he is.
No, yeah, it was insane, and the only reason that he did it was essentially to piss Porzingis off, or to just bitch about it in the media, which I don't know why you're bitching about it in the media. Like, who cares about an exit interview? And he's like, he blatantly lies. Either he blatantly lied, or we have other issues in terms of his mental acuity. Because within like 5 minutes of him saying, "Yeah, like I've never had a player skip an exit interview before," I think it was maybe Sam Amick or Howard Beck or something pulls up. Yeah, Shaquille O'Neal skipped an exit interview one year. Like, what are we doing, Phil? Like, what are we even thinking of doing here? And the best part about all of this is, they could have gotten out of this contract. They could have gotten out of this contract in April or something like that. But instead, in March, before they had to make the decision, they decide to exercise the final 2 years of a mutual option in Phil Jackson's contract to give him $24 million for the next 2 years. It's unbelievable how inept that organization is. James Dolan was clearly way too concerned about playing his show at some bullshit dive bar in New York or whatever the hell it was. I don't know where the dive bar was.
It's probably Hoboken.
Yeah, like I don't know what the bar was. I'm assuming it's a dive bar, just because JD and the Straight Shot does not seem like the best band to be playing these super high class venues.
You don't think they've sold out the Beacon?
So like, he's way too concerned about that to even recognize what Phil is doing. He's just letting him do his thing, and then he reads in the media, or really has Charlotte Wilder from SB Nation tell him, because she went to the show, like, oh yeah, like, what do you think of these Kristaps Porzingis trade rumors? And like, he acts like he has no idea or whatever, and then what is the reported reason that Phil Jackson gets fired? He started to get concerned after the Kristaps Porzingis trade rumors. It's fucking insane. It's just fucking insane. I have no idea.
Okay, well, Phil has been edging to get out of this job since he went on a vacation through the Great Plains during free agency 2 years ago. So we should have probably have picked up the hint then that he wasn't all that interested. The fact that, he gave Carmelo Anthony that no-trade clause like 5 months into his tenure. He didn't know Carmelo Anthony at all, and he sold the franchise to him in many senses, and has now spent the last couple of years trying to convince Carmelo that it's so terrible here, you must go, please waive that no-trade clause. But the thing is, Phil hasn't really broken character. He's lazier, he's older, and he's not as motivated as he once was, but he's still doing the same crap that he did when he was coaching. It's all the mind games. And it was different when he could do that on the bench and play the mind games in practice. And it was very one-on-one and direct. Now, because he just doesn't want to put in the effort to be there every day and he doesn't want to travel with the team, the only way that he can do that kind of mind game bullshit, it was through the media and his mouthpieces and by, trying to control people that way. Phil has always believed that he's smarter than everybody else, and ultimately, the game of basketball evolved too quickly for him. And I think that the landscape around basketball and the narrative and the media around it evolved a little bit too quickly for him too. And ultimately, the same kung fu moves that he was using were 3 seasons out of date or more. And it's not that surprising. I kind of feel a little bit
3 seasons. You're giving him 3 seasons?
No. But like 3 seasons behind is way behind.
I might give him like 3 decades.
No. That's not fair.
It's not. But like, I know that he won a title in 2008 or whatever, right? But 2009, I think it was actually.
Right.
So no,
it's not fair. I do feel a little bit for James Dolan here, though. because he's
no.
Let me say my piece, and then you can go about how he's the worst in this and that. Like, James Dolan can't win for trying in this situation. So listen, what happened in the past, he fucked up a bunch. Okay, no one's going to dispute that. Maybe James Dolan would dispute it, but no one in their right mind is going to dispute that. And so what did he do? He gave in to sort of the wishes that he was picking up through the New York media and the fan base, which is hand over control. You are meddling too much in this team. You are too involved. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. Go out and hire somebody to handle all of this. Go get a president of basketball operations and wash your hands of the team. And so he goes out and he hires what, at the time, people thought were good hires. He went out and hired Isaiah Thomas. And everyone said, Zeke is one of the best minds in basketball, and what a great choice. That didn't work out in any way, shape, or form. And so then how do you go after that? And it's like, well, go get Phil Jackson. Do you remember how everyone's like, wow, that's a good hire for the Knicks. He's going to turn them around. It's Phil Jackson. I just don't know how James Dolan could have known that Phil Jackson was going to tank his entire tenure there. And so now what's he supposed to do? Become more involved after he was told to not be involved because he meddled too much and didn't know what the fuck he's doing? He's going to have to go hire somebody else. And eventually, theoretically, he has to get the hire right. And I would just hire David Griffin and get it over with, because you know that he can handle it, and maintain this hands-off thing where you don't, whether you're pretending or not, you don't know what's going on with Porzingis, and you just let somebody who's smart handle the basketball operations. You've gotten burned now a couple of times, but that doesn't mean that that's not the right play, and that doesn't mean that, that's not what you should continue to do. So I do feel for James Dolan a little bit in this. That said, this is a problem of his own making from all of his incompetence over the years before this.
He fucking scheduled a concert for his shitty band on draft night.
What was he going to do on draft night? Like, this is.
There are a lot of owners that are in draft rooms that are like actually paying attention to what their investments are doing.
And there's a lot of owners that aren't, and those teams are somewhat.
But they're at least watching the draft most of the time. I would imagine that.
What do you care? As long as the check's clear.
I would imagine that every.
Do you know who the owner of the San Antonio Spurs is?
Yeah, it's Peter Holt. Okay,
you think Peter Holt was in the room?
I don't know if he was in the room, but I bet he was paying attention.
I bet he was paying attention, but I don't know if it had its undivided attention. And I bet you he wasn't in that room. Peter Holt empowers R.C. Buford.
It's also different when you're empowering guys that have a proven track record of success. Whenever you have a flaming dumpster fire of a train wreck that's going off the rails, like, you at least might want to be in the room.
I don't disagree with
I'm not saying that Phil doesn't have a track record. I'm saying that this thing is going so poorly right now.
Yeah,
you at least need to have some sort of control.
But think about this from James Dolan. The last time you meddled, you got your hand burned, and everybody said that you shouldn't do that. That's the one thing that you shouldn't do. Give it to somebody else. So now when it's going off the rails, what are you supposed to do? Oh, I'm going to get involved here. It's like a gambler. Who goes to some Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and then he's like, but I had a good day, so today's the day that I win. Like, you have to stick to the principle of it. And James Dolan, right or wrong, has the principle now that I'm not going to meddle with basketball operations. I'm going to let the person that I hire as the president of basketball operations handle this, and I'm not going to get bogged down by the day-to-day. I'm just going to let an index fund do its job. And sometimes you pick a bad freaking mutual fund, in this case, a bad freaking mutual fund. But, man, like, it's a damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. If he had gotten involved and was in that...
He fired him after... He let him handle the draft, fired him after the draft 3 days before free agency.
What were the Knicks going to do? Were they not going to take Frank?
No, I don't know that... If they have a different general manager, I think there's a very real chance that Ntilikina is not the pick.
I would like to establish that the Cleveland Cavaliers do not have a general manager and did not have a pick.
But which is equally as dumb. All of this is equally as dumb.
I agree with you that James Dolan probably should not have picked up the option for Phil Jackson come April. That should have been a very clear delineation point, and it's ridiculous that it got this far. But you can't police the results. You have to police the methodology. And while the methodology is in no way perfect, I do feel a little bit for him because he is now beholden to the results all the time. And no one ever really gives him credit for being hands-off. and he's really just not good at this. And maybe we should cut the guy a little bit of frickin' slack. If he makes a good hire here, the Knicks are fine. And
ultimately, you hit it on the head. He's not good at this.
No, he's not good at this. But you know what? He's the owner of the frickin' team, and he has unlimited funds, and you can't fire a damn owner. Even Jed York got one hire right, in 49ers.
Danny LaRue and I had this conversation on Real GM Radio, which you should all go listen to, by the way.
It's fantastic listening.
Danny does a great job. We had this conversation where we pretty stringently believe that the NBA should be able to take the Knicks away from James Dolan.
Yes, I don't think that that's going to happen, but I do think that it's good fodder for an article.
Yes, I would probably agree with that. Look, I can't,
because if we're getting rid of owners, I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf is number one on my list, and I will not stop until that man has been taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Dolan is probably worse, given the fact that Reinsdorf, has won championships, even though he got luck boxed into Michael Jordan. But it's more difficult for me to get rid of Jerry Reinsdorf than it is to get rid of James Dolan.
I would like to establish that the most successful era in NBA history, which is now, has been doing just fine. The NBA has been doing just fine with the Lakers being shit and the Knicks being shit.
That's true. And it's really remarkable, by the way, that's been the case.
It is and it isn't. Because it's about players, and it's not about these teams and their sort of indentured servitude eras.
The NBA's done a great job of that. They've done a great job of marketing the players as opposed to the teams. And that's
one of the biggest stars in the NBA plays in Oklahoma fucking City.
It's really incredible.
2 of them at one point. 3 of them at one point.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm not one of these people that thinks, the Knicks need to be good. The Knicks will
certainly help if the Knicks were good.
Yeah, it would. But you know what? They aren't, and we're all doing pretty okay otherwise.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's talk free agents. The top 2 free agents on the board here clearly are Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant.
They're both going back to the Warriors.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we need to really talk about that. Stephen Curry is going to get the designated veteran player extension rule. Kevin Durant, there are questions about whether or not he's going to be willing to take less, whether or not he's going to get maxed out. We'll see ultimately, but it does seem very clear he is going to end up back in Golden State. The guy that they affect most clearly is Andre Iguodala. Iguodala is going to be taking meetings, it seems like. And what do we kind of make of him? He is not necessarily the best free agent on the market. He's not necessarily the most important free agent on the market, but he is very clearly an extremely high-end piece that the Golden State Warriors would be loath to lose.
Absolutely. I'll say this from knowing Andre Iguodala here for the last couple of years with my time with the Warriors and covering the Warriors. He is an inscrutable human being, and I would be remiss to ever predict what the hell that man is going to do. He is very intelligent, and he is very private. So when it comes to these meetings, I don't know if I have a read on them fully, in the sense of he could just be doing this to get more money out of the Warriors. The Warriors do not want to go too heavy into the luxury tax, because they also know that Klay Thompson and Draymond Green are coming up here in the not too distant future, and Kevin Durant's about to get a huge contract extension next year. So they're going to start paying $3 on the dollar for players, and if they can avoid that, that sure would be swell. That said, Joe Lacob will pay it if he has to. I can tell you this, Andre Iguodala doesn't give a damn how much money Joe Lacob has to put out there, and he will be aggressive about that point to anyone who is within earshot.
As he shouldn't. I feel very strongly about that.
Well, some guys are a little more couth about how they handle it.
They are, but at the end of the day, I do strongly side with Andre Iguodala.
Get your money, Andre. You've earned it. You're a Finals MVP, and if you thought that he was fading, those NBA Finals should convince you otherwise. I think he's going to take a lot of interest from other teams. I think a lot of other teams are going to not necessarily extend him the offers that he might be looking for. I think that the fact that he's most likely to drag out his free agency and take as many meetings as possible and be very calculated about it will not work to his advantage because the money is going to dry up very quickly in this marketplace. We do not have that massive salary cap bump. The salary cap has gone down about $11 million from where it was projected to be before, the big $20 million spike with the new TV deal. That money's going to dry up real quick once the marquee free agents go, and Andre Iguodala is clearly a Class 2 free agent in this class. I ultimately think he goes back to Golden State for something around 3 years, $40 million. Could be a little bit more than that. It wouldn't, but I would not rule out in any way, shape, or form him going to a place like Philadelphia for a 1 year cash in, but that would have to be a lot of money, or a place going back to Denver on maybe a 3 or 4 year deal, or a 3 year deal for max money, because he is a culture changer, and teams will value that. And also, Denver doesn't really know what it's doing.
Denver interests me for him. He's played a little bit of small ball for Golden State. Not like a crazy amount, but like that would be an interesting fit next to Nikola Jokic. If the Spurs could clear money, I would love that. Yeah. Like basically, if they can get rid of Pau Gasol and replace Pau with Andre Iguodala in that lineup, like just attach their first round pick to Pau. I don't. Really well, no, wait. Did Pau declined that option? Now that I think about it,
he declined the option, but that's a wink. That's a Spurs collusion thing where he's going to take the minimum and then probably take non-Bird going forward, or sign a 3 year deal at less money. It's something like 3 years, 20 or something. Take more guaranteed money. It's just one of those Spurs deals that you're like, that's some shady ass shit.
I love it though.
No, I love it too, but Pau Gasol is not playing anywhere else next year but San Antonio, and he's playing next year.
Yeah, I mean, a good fit is Miami. I don't know if he really needs to change culture there or anything. They'd be willing to pay him, I am sure, because they really do want to make the playoffs next year. Other than that, it's difficult. Like, could Phoenix decide that, could Ryan McDonough essentially decide, I need to save my job, I need to make the playoffs, I can go out and try and sign Andre Iguodala. We'll get to a couple free agents later that it does seem like he is going to really make a push for at the power forward position.
Right.
Iguodala is a good fit there just because he would essentially change the culture there. He would provide defense so that they so desperately need. He would be able to do a lot of different things.
A team that I would think that might be able to get into the Andre Iguodala sweepstakes, and a team that might actually be a lot closer to contention, not title contention, but second round of the playoff contention. A team like Dallas can probably move enough money to get Andre Iguodala in there, and that would be really interesting with two veteran presences like that. But Andre Iguodala can really contribute. And the question is, does Andre Iguodala want to play more minutes? Does he feel minimized? Does he feel degraded at all by being a bench player in Golden State and kind of being the forgotten cog in that machine? I don't think that's the case. I think he loves living in the city. He took less money to go there in the first place. The reason that he did that was to create in part what the Warriors have become. I don't think that he saw these kind of heights, but he certainly feels like he's responsible in some way. I can tell you this, that feels responsible in some way for Golden State's success because he did take less money than he had to go there, and has sacrificed for that team. Now that it could be a Dwayne Wade situation like last year. I have sacrificed. Now it's time to show loyalty, and if you don't do it, I'm going to head somewhere else. I don't think it's like that. I think that I think ultimately the Warriors and him can find a happy medium, and I don't think that there's going to be another team out there that's going to throw $20-25 million at him.
I think a lot of teams would throw 20 at him.
But for how long?
Probably 3 years. I think he could get.
You think he can get a $60 million contract?
I do. I really do.
I really don't.
I think that if Miami misses on Blake Griffin and misses on, Gordon Hayward and Paul Millsap or something like that, I can see them just deciding, you know what, we want to make the playoffs. We're going to go ahead and sign Andre Iguodala. I think Denver, I think if I was them, I would throw that money at him, to be honest.
That's where Denver plays in this marketplace, because Denver it's clear that they're just done being crap, and that they want to get the 7 or an 8 seed, and they're happy being the Thunder. And Andre Iguodala can make them the Thunder very fast.
Yeah. Let's talk Gordon Hayward. I would say he's probably the most important decision here. He's still so young at 27 years old. He is going to be able to shape a roster. He's going to make an All-NBA team at some point in his career. I feel pretty strongly about that. Do you kind of buy into the Boston thing? Because I will say that I do. I feel pretty good about the fact that I think Boston is the favorite right now. I don't know. I don't know if they're necessarily like above 50% to get him, or like they might be at like 45%, and Utah is at 35%, and Miami's 20% or something like that. But I do think that they're probably the favorite right now. What kind of impression do you get about what kind of difference maker he can be, and where you think he finally ends up?
I think that Hayward is a fascinating player. I think that he's not going to be the best player on a title team.
No.
But he could be, in the sense that, you get a bunch of really good players of a similar style. In Utah, they basically ran the offense around him. George Hill is really an off-ball guy. And they ran it sort of through that high post off elbow through him. And it's a deadly offense. And Quinn Snyder really did a wonderful job in doing it. And I would love to see that evolve more. I mean, him and Rudy Gobert, that is one hell of a 1-2, and it really doesn't get enough respect around the NBA, and it could really blossom into something special. I don't think it could blossom into a title contender, but, that said, the Jazz can get lucky with a couple draft picks, or, who knows if Joe Ingles still has any room to improve in there, or Hood. I mean, it's
Donovan Mitchell that they just acquired.
Yeah,
in the draft.
There's a lot of potential in Utah, and it would be a shame, because it really is built around Hayward. It would be a shame to see that go. That said, Boston can be a title contender, a true, bona fide, we're not having to mince words about it, title contender tomorrow if they get Gordon Hayward. Because if they get Gordon Hayward, they're getting Paul George too. They're going all in on the next 3 or 4 years, and that they're gonna have to cut off on the periphery of their roster, but that starting five, or I guess let's call it the closing five, which I would imagine would be Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, Paul George, Jay Crowder, Al Horford. That is a Brad Stevens team if I've ever freaking heard one. And that is some next level positionless bullshit that they're going to have going on in Boston. I would love to watch that go down against a Cavs team that's more and more specialists. You're going to have these guys that can kind of do it all, except for play defense in the case of Isaiah Thomas, out on the court.
Yeah, I think that my favorite lineup for them would be Isaiah, Marcus Smart, Gordon Hayward, Paul George, Al Horford, because the rest of the four can shoot. You can really just sick Marcus, like playing a crazy-ass defense and attacking closeouts and doing things that he can do, right? Like he can initiate offense. He can really pass it a little bit. He can do a lot of different things offensively, even if his shot isn't great by any stretch of the imagination yet, and I think that is improving every year nonetheless. I really like that fit, and they're going to be able to bring Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum off the bench with even more.
Maybe, because it does. I mean, the big question is, okay, you get Hayward, now you have a team with some young talent on it, some established talent on it. You're better than you were last year, but you're going to have to give up either Tatum or Jaylen Brown, either Smart or Avery Bradley, in my opinion, with a trade asset or two, even to go get a guy like Paul George with the wink that they're gonna extend him into the future. And it sounds like he's interested in doing that if he plays with Gordon Hayward. They will have to sacrifice, and they probably have to renounce Kelly Olynyk. So they're going to have to sacrifice a lot of key players that got them the number one seed this year. Not that was worth anything or that they were any good at it, but the team will be more top-heavy. I don't know exactly how that would structure out, and there's a lot of people who are a lot better at the salary cap than I am in handling those things. But it's that core, and it relieves a lot of pressure on the Celtics, especially they keep moving the line back. Danny Ainge does, going in and going after LeBron. That's good for the NBA, and Gordon Hayward is the first part of that. And if Gordon Hayward doesn't go, and you had it handicapped as 20, 30, 40, or 50 or whatever, I see it as a 50-50 proposition between Boston and Utah right now. And Hayward's about the only one who can probably wait in this market and still get his full fair market value, which is the max. Or in his case, it might actually be a 2+1 instead of a 3+1 that he could get from Boston. He might keep a 3+1 in Utah if he stays, just so that he gets on the market again in a couple of years. But
I think he would go 1+1 if he stays in Utah, for what it's worth.
Interesting,
because I think he would want the ability to get the designated veteran player extension.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, we don't know what that Boston team would look like. I just know that it's going to be a title contender because they have enough assets to not have to jeopardize too much in the present. And I think that Utah is going to be a team that, if there's all season I thought if there was any team in the Western Conference, and this includes the Spurs and it includes the Rockets, if there's any team in the Western Conference that was really going to make the Warriors' life difficult, it was going to be the Utah Jazz, and that ultimately didn't even come close to passing. But going forward, I still have optimism that core with Quinn Snyder as the coach and Gordon Hayward running the offense off of there, and we'll see what happens with George Hill, that team with Rudy Gobert in the middle has a real chance to give Golden State a real headache in the playoffs. And if they can beat them, they can beat anybody. And I'm fascinated to see it because Gordon Hayward isn't perhaps as good of a player as what he can bring to another team. He's so pivotal to these two franchises right now and what it is they want to be and what it is that they can do. I don't think that Gordon Hayward is necessarily one of the 15 best players in the NBA right now, but he's definitely one of the 15 most important players in the NBA right now. And whichever way it goes, it's really going to have massive ramifications across the league.
Yeah. I will say one thing. I do not think Boston will have to give up either Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum in a Paul George trade. I will predict that now. But you're right about Gordon Hayward. My guess is that he will sign either a 3+1 in Boston or a 1+1 in Utah. We'll see how it goes, though.
You care to go on the record with a guess on which way he goes?
Oh man, this is just dangerous. I don't know. This is. I would not bet on it, to be honest. I'm at 50-50. And if you really made me think about it, I think he goes to Boston. Yeah, I think I agree with that take too. I think
it's the aggressive play, and ultimately because he isn't going to sign, it would just be a 1+1 in Utah or 2+1 in Utah. The money is a little bit different, obviously, but because of the length of the contract, that he can't get that big money 4-year deal or 5-year deal in Utah, or he wouldn't want to take it. I think that evens the race a little bit, and then it's like, well, which place can I win a title sooner? And it's definitely not in the Western Conference.
Yeah. Blake Griffin, we kind of talked about him a little bit at the top. I'm just going to ask the question here. Like, we've gone into this, I think, enough. Does he get the 5-year max from Los Angeles?
The Clippers give him the money. I think he stays with the Clippers.
I agree with that. I also believe that Blake will stay in Los Angeles.
Real fast, I love how he's now pretending. Maybe he's not pretending, but he's really giving the Suns some thought, which is just like an all-time great agent leak to get that full money out of the Clippers. Just well played. Well played.
Absolutely got to do it. The next best player on the market, for me at the very least, is going to be Kyle Lowry out of Toronto. He genuinely is one of the 15 best players in the NBA, in my opinion, when he's on the floor. If you've looked at anything that he's done, he's become one of the 5 best shooters off the bounce in the NBA. He is still a good defender, if not necessarily an elite-level defender. The problem for Kyle's market, though, is that it's dried up a little bit monetarily. So Philadelphia, not necessarily going to be in the market for a point guard anymore. Houston, not necessarily in the market for a point guard anymore. San Antonio, doesn't seem like they're super interested at the moment.
Yeah, but that's how San Antonio operates, though, when they really like somebody.
It's true. I mean, if I was them, I would certainly schedule some sort of meeting to be sure. But beyond that, like, if New Orleans loses Drew Holiday, like, maybe that's a fit. Maybe Dallas, kind of.
No, that doesn't make a lot of sense with Dennis Smith being there. They're going to hand the keys over, and Lowry would.
I would think so, but
valid. I mean, they could do something irrational, sure, but it doesn't seem in the cards for Dallas. I would put that very low on the list.
Yeah, no, I agree, but like you look around the NBA, it's really difficult. Like Miami has a lot of money. Miami has Goran Dragic. Like maybe you can play Dragic off ball. He's obviously had a lot of success in 2-point guard systems. My point here is, though, is that ultimately it does seem like the best option for him is going to be going back to Toronto. The question is, how much is Toronto going to be giving him? How much is that roster going to turn over? How much, there are just so many different factors here to consider. And my favorite place for him, if they could find a way to make it work, is Milwaukee. I think that Milwaukee would become a legitimate Eastern Conference contender with him in that lineup.
I don't think that there's a single way that Milwaukee can make that work. The amount of money that they would have to get out from under. I mean, they're in tax hell. Much less salary cap hell.
They would need to find a way to get out from under Greg Monroe. They would need to find a way to get out from you would have to renounce Tony Snell at that stage. You would have to do so much to make it work, but that would be my ideal fit for him, even though it's totally irrational and not plausible, really.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. It would be awesome to see him in that system.
But the point here is that his money has dried up very quickly in this market, and I'm interested to see how he and the rest of the point guards fare here, because Drew Holiday, free agent, George Hill, free agent, both a level below Kyle Lowry, but both exceedingly effective players. Eric Bledsoe, a trade target that we talked about. Where does he fit into this? Ricky Rubio, a trade target. Where does he fit into this? Is Minnesota a possibility for Kyle Lowry? If they can find a taker to take on essentially all of Ricky Rubio's money for the price of just salary cap space. I don't really know. I'm very interested to see how this market plays itself out. The point guard market, for me, is the most combustible in this market.
Absolutely on that. That's factual. That money's going to dry up real fast. Kyle Lowry has to really make it look like he might leave Toronto and 2 years old. And let's just be honest. I mean, he's not a player that you think is going to be a value for your team when he's 35, 36. You're going to be paying him way above. You're going to be paying him close to $40 million a year, if not more. Kyle Lowry is already perhaps lost half a step. So it's one of those things where ultimately I think he takes the most money, which will be in Toronto. And don't read too much. I'm sure someone will bring up, the Canadian tax code and stuff. That really isn't a factor, and not for Kyle Lowry. It isn't a factor financially. No accountant would tell you it's a factor now. But this is a guy, you have to remember the path of his career, and I think that that's very important to put into context with a lot of guys. And Kyle Lowry's a guy who's been traded, cut, fat, skinny, and no one wanted, and he's blossomed into a true star in this league. And all of those trials and tribulations, I think, ultimately will lead him to believe, I gots to get paid, and he should. And Toronto's the place that's going to end up doing it, but he's got to go through all of the hoops to get Toronto to fully max him out. I wouldn't be shocked if he signs for less than the max, just because the market isn't there for a player of his caliber, age, and ultimately what he's going to command, because the teams that need point guards won't have that money readily available to him.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I also missed Jeff Teague in this point guard conglomeration.
You mean future New York Knick Jeff Teague?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the Knicks at the moment. That whole situation's a mess. Let's talk Drew Holiday. Do you think Drew Holiday ends up leaving New Orleans? I think they're going to do whatever they have to do to keep him, to be honest.
They have no choice. Yeah, I mean, they could get cute. And there's probably in this market they might end up being okay if they get cute, because you can get some solid point guards. I mean, a Jeff Teague might be willing to go at half of the price of a Drew Holiday once we get into the first, once we get past a couple of days and a couple signings into this thing. But it's all or nothing this year for the Pelicans, and Drew Holiday is a excellent basketball player. I think that he will reward the Pelicans for being so kind to him and his family last year, and just let this get over with soon. The Pelicans will make him a very strong offer. He won't counter negotiate. They'll call it where it's at. He'll get $23, $24 million a year.
Yeah, I hope that ends up being the case too. George Hill, I think that's probably the San Antonio fit. If you made me guess, he is still beloved there by that front office, by that staff. Greg Popovich has said many times, like, George Hill is one of his favorite players to coach over the course of his career. We'll see what ends up happening in Utah. So much of it is very dependent on Gordon Hayward. If Gordon Hayward re-signs, I think there's a pretty good chance George Hill re-signs. If Gordon Hayward doesn't re-sign, I do look at George Hill as a really good candidate to end up in San Antonio and kind of hole over their point guard need, because he is capable of playing both the one and the two. He's exactly what they need for when Tony Parker recovers from his really ugly injury in the playoffs.
Totally agree with you. I think San Antonio is a great fit there. If Gordon Hayward stays in Utah, I think that ultimately the Jazz don't have much of a choice but to give George Hill whatever they want or whatever he wants, just because, again, he's such a professional and his skill set, it doesn't necessarily suit every team in the NBA, because not every team in the NBA is good and knows what the hell they're doing. George Hill is a valuable asset to a winning team. There will be winning teams that will line up to give him between $17 and $20 million a year, and the length of that deal, who knows, and who knows if he'll take less money to go to San Antonio. I do see him as a Spur, though.
Let's move on to Paul Millsap. Paul Millsap, like Blake Griffin, their agents have leaked that they are going to meet with Phoenix, which is just funny to me given the fact that Phoenix drafted 2 power forwards last year.
He's getting used.
Marquise Chris and Dragan Bender. I do understand why Ryan McDonough, again, would want to meet with these guys. They're excellent players. Obviously, he is under some stress. He is going to be under the gun this year. They need to show some sort of improvement for him to keep his job realistically, I think. And getting Paul Millsap, getting Blake Griffin, guys like that would really help make his case. He would probably win 40 games this year between both Millsap and Josh Jackson, really revamping that defense.
I feel like you're giving this way too much credence.
I probably am, but I just don't. Again, like Paul Millsap, his ultimate perfect fit for me is Denver. Denver, again, a team that really does want to see. It seems like they really want to make a step forward, make the playoffs next year. He is the prototypical player that you want to put next to Nikola Jokic. Genuinely, for me, a top 6 or 7 defender in all of the NBA. Unbelievable.
Will he be when that contract's up?
No, he won't be. But you're talking about a guy that's going to be getting, probably 4 years, $120 million, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, maybe a little less, actually, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a silly amount of money, obviously, nonetheless. But his max is actually higher than that. Like, his max is...
No, totally, 100%.
Yeah, like, his max is something like $35 million starting at, which would get you all the way up to 40 or so in the last year, which is just insane, right?
You can't do that with Paul Millsap.
Yeah, you can't give him $150 million.
I like the fit for him in Minnesota if they can move some money around.
They're going to really have to move some money around to be sure. I also like the fit of him at the 4, can space the floor a little bit, which is exactly what they need to do.
And they need that defensive intensity. Him and Jimmy Butler on the same defense almost makes up for Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, who I still think can be a pretty solid defender when he figures it out, and whoever is at point guard for them. I think that balance is necessary, and frankly, I think that they can make that money work, and that Paul Millsap would see himself as sort of the last piece of a team that could really make a run in the Western Conference, not only this year but for years to come.
Can we talk about the ridiculousness that was Andrew Wiggins being named the worst defender in the NBA?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, like 538 decided to name him the least defensive player in the NBA. That is just ridiculous to me. He gets the toughest assignments every night because he is capable of at least athletically staying with those guys. Athletically staying with those guys is a huge part of being a defender. He's certainly lackadaisical. He certainly is a bit of a problem on that end from time to time, just for those reasons. Ultimately, though, he's still not the worst defender in the NBA, even if he is not yet an average defender in the NBA.
No, Isaiah Thomas is the worst defender in the NBA, in my opinion, and that's of just guys who get high volume. I think that Andrew Wiggins can actually be a salvageable defender in the NBA. I don't even think he was the worst on his own team last year. I would argue that Zach LaVine was, but that's not important in the moment.
LaVine is a worse defender than Andrew Wiggins. I would say that pretty confidently.
So, I'm very interested to see how the conversation around defense changes in the years to come around the NBA, because I still think we're sort of in the previous era or two, where we're so, everything is about it. We've come to the light with efficiency on offense. I wish that we could sort of raise our levels on the defensive side as well, because right now we all sound like morons, and that's just the cut and dry of it.
In terms of unrestricted free agents, there have been some rumors about Serge Ibaka kind of having a deal in place in Toronto. That wouldn't really be a surprise, given the fact that he and Masai Ujiri really do go a ways back. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be shocked, like I said, if he ends up back in Toronto. I would expect him, honestly, to end up back in Toronto, regardless of the way that the Kyle Lowry situation ends up. The other kind of major free agent here, though, is Danilo Gallinari, who's coming off of one of his best offensive seasons, maybe his best offensive season as a pro. And that is interesting in a lot of ways, because, Nikola Jokic will really help you be a great defender, obviously, or be a great offensive player, obviously. He's not what they need, though. They need a guy who can defend next to Nikola Jokic. So he's not really a great fit in Denver anymore. So where do you kind of see a fit for Danilo Gallinari on this market?
It's a great question. I like him in Dallas.
Yep.
I think that could help space the floor a little bit there. I'll
tell you one.
Where's one that really pops out for you?
If Gordon Hayward doesn't go to Boston, I'm interested in that.
Interesting.
Because I do think that Brad Stevens would get a good amount of value out of him. Offensively, certainly. Jonas Jerebko played such a strong role for them off of the bench. Gallinari is essentially like just double Jonas Jerebko in terms of value. Similar in terms of style in a way. Jerebko is maybe a little bit tougher. Gallinari a little bit more skilled. Obviously, can create his own shot a little bit better, but it's an interesting comparison for me, and we've seen Stevens get the best out of Jerebko, at least in a similar style of player.
Yeah, I really – that's tough because of the money that would be necessary, I ultimately think, to get a guy like Gallinari, and I just think that doesn't jive. I don't think that he's going to be able to get the sort of output, given his limitations, that would justify that sort of a number. Danny Ainge is very conscious about return on investment.
Sure,
and
that's a good point.
And Gallinari is not a good defensive player, and is he's got a track or two, and they are some bangers, and everything else on the album sucks. And
Miami's an interesting fit too if they miss out on some guys.
That's where I was thinking, but he does not scream Miami Heat toughness intensity to me.
No, he doesn't.
It wouldn't shock me if he returned to New York. Oh my God! Or if Brooklyn threw him some money just to make him, just to put some asses in the seats.
That's not a bad idea. I don't hate that at all.
Sacramento might be interested in getting in on it. They got nothing but money, and Lord knows what they're doing up there. I think Houston would love to have him. They already have Ryan Anderson.
So they can't make that work.
I don't think that they can make it work. And there's no sign and trade option there or anything like that.
He's legit going to get $25 million a year.
And listen, if I'm somebody who's going to offer him $25 million a year, I think I wait for Mirotic to hit the RFA market and just give him that, because I think that they're not that dissimilar of players. I understand that Gallinari is a class better, but if you're just looking for a four who can space it, I mean, you have three different tranches of that with Ersan Ilyasova, who sucks. That
is hateful.
Nikola Mirotic, who was once benched for an extended period of time for no reason by Fred Hoiberg, so infer what you want from that, and Danilo Gallinari, who only plays one end of the court. So is what it is. I mean, it's $25 million, yes, in this market, and yes, with a lot of teams that really need a floor spacing 4. But man, I just don't know if I can agree with you on Boston, even though it does seem like such a great scheme fit.
Let's go ahead and move forward a little bit into the restricted free agency market. Otto Porter, it seems pretty likely and obvious that he will just simply get near maxed from Washington, if not maxed.
Yeah.
Coming off of a really good year, you can at least defend giving him, what would it be? It'd be like 4 years, $110 or so million.
The Wizards have no choice. They have to give Otto Porter whatever the hell he wants.
Right. They just don't have a path to getting better, essentially. Nerlens Noel is probably the second most high-profile restricted free agent.
This is some profile.
I am interested to see if Dallas maxes him.
I don't think they will, just because remember what he got last year. I mean, he only got like 2 second-round picks or something. I mean, those concerns are still real.
If I was them, I would let him hit the market and get maxed. Like if it ends up that he gets he signs a like a 3-year deal that ends up being a 2+1 on the restricted free agency market, so be it. I'm okay. I'm willing to live with that. Otherwise, I'm not comfortable with the Nerlens Noel experience. I've talked about that on the podcast before.
I'm a big fan of Nerlens Noel, and I think he's worth the risk because ultimately I believe that you can take a great might be a stretch right now, but a very good defensive center and turn him into a bit of an offensive threat, a la DeAndre Jordan, as opposed to taking an offensive center and trying to make him in any way a defensive threat on the other end of the court. I would much rather have that low offensive ceiling to begin with. He's not going to get maxed out on the RFA market. There's nobody. This guy was readily available to any team a few months ago, and no one gave up a first rounder for him. I mean, even an end of the first rounder for him. So
I think that
max contract from his time in Dallas is preposterous to me.
Yeah, I think that his situation is going to extend deep into free agency.
Interesting.
I think that it's going to take some time to kind of get this work. Ultimately, I do think that he ends up back in Dallas. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is in another situation where Detroit basically has to do whatever they have to keep him. I like him. I like the idea of the skill sets that he kind of brings, but it's still more of a theoretical skill set at this stage, even though he is 24, he's going to keep getting better. He's a good defender, not like a super elite defender. He's still also more of a 1-2 defender than a guy who's going to be able to be super switchable, right? The three-point shot has been not quite as strong as what you would hope for from a 3-and-D type of guard in like what his best case scenario is, right?
But there's optimism that three-point shot comes around.
There is, but he's also been in the league 4 years now, and it hasn't.
You're right. Listen, I'm not insinuating one way or another if it could, but I've also seen this guy knock down like 5 3-pointers in the game, and you're like, that's a pretty stroke. And with his tenacity on the defensive end, you're like, this guy can make some money.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he is a bad basketball player by any stretch of the imagination. I do think there is a decent chance he gets max money though, and
I think that's fair.
I don't think that will happen. I think there's a good chance it'll happen, but I don't think it's a worthwhile investment for him.
Yeah. I ultimately think that the Pistons I don't know what the Pistons' plan is.
No one does.
Know what the plan is. I mean, give Stan Van Gundy control, and I guess this is what happens. But they can't let him go. He's a key part of whatever the hell it is they think they're doing there. And I don't think he gets the full max. I think he gets whatever Otto Porter gets, which is kind of laughable to me because Otto Porter is, I think, a markedly better player.
I agree.
Than Caldwell-Pope, but ultimately the market dictates what you're worth, and I think that both of those guys will get similar offers from similar teams, and both teams will match.
I agree. Mason Plumlee and Kelly Olynyk. Olynyk is in a weird spot because The likelihood is that he does end up being an unrestricted free agent, but at the moment, it does seem like Boston is going to offer him the qualifying offer, make him restricted until they have to rescind the qualifying offer and rescind his cap hold. Who would you rather have, Kelly Olynyk or Mason Plumlee?
Jesus Christ, what a question. I'd rather have Kelly Olynyk.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that market looks like for him. Because I'm not sure how teams view him as a 4 or a 5. And I would like him as a backup 5 that can come on the court. He's not going to give you much defense, if any, but he's going to space it, and he's going to affect the game without necessarily having the ball in his hands, just because he's a threat that not a lot of other teams can counter. And I think that there might be, I don't know how robust that market is, but I do think it will be a lucrative one for him. And I ultimately do think that he ends up being a UFA. And, a team, again, Orlando, Brooklyn, a not good team might be really willing to throw some extra money at him, just, thinking that he can knock down some threes and they can try something weird with them and see if maybe it works in a way that could bring more success than just going the traditional route.
Yeah, I think that somewhere between 11 and 14 is probably
a lot of money.
Number. And it's a lot of money, but their numbers I'm okay going with. Like, I'm okay dealing. Yeah,
no one's gonna get too crazy about it. I mean, that's what the market dictates. But at the same time, it's like you can see Boston certainly not. This is. It depends. I mean, if it drags out, Kelly Olynyk's contract could get really cheap pretty quick. I mean, I could see it getting down to like $5 million a year if it drags out in the way that it could. I mean, there's a very real chance that like Alex Len, who was like the number 4 pick a couple of years ago from the Sun, is an unrestricted free agent and signs to like a $3 million a year contract.
Olynyk's considerably better though.
No, and that's my point. It's just a weird market. Like, I don't think anything of Alex Len. I haven't since he entered the league. But, Olynyk is a different cat, and not every team is going to be in on that kind of a difference.
Yeah, Mason Plumlee's in an interesting spot, too, because I think that an opposing team can just kind of stick Denver with any sort of real restricted free agency offer. Like, I think you could say 4 years, $52 million, Mason Plumlee, and Denver will match. And just be like, okay, we now have our backup center for the next X number of years. 4 years.
And probably no reason to get cute with it, just given where Denver's at and the money that they have to play with. And is it sexy? Is it going to make your fan base think that anything's changed? Hell no, but you can do a lot dumber things.
Yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr., for instance. Giving Tim Hardaway Jr. anything more than like $11 million seems terrifying to me.
And I don't think that's going to happen.
I do. I absolutely do.
Explain that scenario to me.
He averaged like a pretty decent amount of points per game this year, like something like 15 points per game, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, something like that. Like, above average player efficiency rating. Like, there's actually quite a bit to think Tim Hardaway Jr. is not a disaster.
Right.
And
that's not
I
true.
think he gets like 15. I think he gets like 15 a year, which is insane.
Do you think that the Hawks give that to him, or do you think that some other team that misses that puts an offer in for Otto Porter and fails? Besides Tim Hardaway's the backup plan.
This is a good question because you might know this better than I do because you may have some experience with Travis Schlenk just from being in the Bay Area.
I
might. He has been very stringent in not wanting bad contracts.
Right.
I don't know what to think of this. I don't necessarily know how to understand how he's going to operate, especially after that Dwight Howard trade just threw me for a total loop. In terms of what he's doing.
Travis Schlenk is resetting his own marketplace. That trade in itself was essentially everybody on the Hawks saying, we hate Dwight Howard, please get rid of him. And then Travis Schlenk just being like, no one wants anything for him. Just take anything to get this guy out of here. I don't think that Travis Schlenk can do any right in this marketplace. The Atlanta Hawks are in no way going to contend next year. They maxed out with the core that they had. Paul Millsap is gone, and maybe they compete for an 8 seed in the East. I mean, they're in that class of teams and heading down. So who gives a shit how much you pay Tim Hardaway Jr.? Because ultimately he's probably only going to – I would probably only extend, with an RFA tenure tender, you have to do at least 2 years. So I guess it would have to be a 2+1 that they would sign him to. But he's going to get some numbers on that team, kind of Harrison Barnes for the Mavericks style. And
Harrison's way better than he is.
No, not saying. Listen, as the foremost Harrison Barnes apologist, I understand where you're coming from, but I just don't think that there's going to be any sort of a robust market for Tim Hardaway Jr. services because again, anyone could have gotten him last year, and they didn't.
But he took the leap, though, is the thing. Like he took a pretty substantial jump, and they paid a first-round pick for him. Like everyone could have had him, but like they still paid a good amount for him, and he took that next leap as well.
Different administration, to be fair. I think ultimately he's back in Atlanta, and the number that I had in my head was about $10 million.
10 or 11 I'm fine with. I'm comfortable
You're
with that.
saying 15, so just split the difference and we'll end up being right.
Yeah. Andre Robertson's one of the more interesting free agent situations. All-defense team this year. One of the least effective offensive players in the entire NBA, in my opinion. The problem with him is that he's not only what Danny LaRue and what Nate Duncan call a record scratch guy, where you get him the open shot on a kick out or on a driving kick or, on a reversal, and he just can't knock down the shot in like the flow of efficient offense. He's also a disaster free throw shooter, which creates another set of issues here. Defensively, he is one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA. He's really, really good. He is like genuinely a potential not only all defense team member, but like defensive player of the year at some point. Like he is really that good. And I don't know what to do with that set of skills. Like does he get $12 million a year? Does he get 15 a year? Does he get 10 million a year? I don't know. Like I don't know what the marketplace for him looks like, especially in the wake of Golden State, where he's effective defending Golden State. Like I can see a team in the Western Conference deciding.
He's also the reason that the Thunder can't beat Golden State because they just have to stop defending him.
Exactly. It's a massive catch-22, and I don't really know how to handle it.
There will be a team that will be willing to take that defensive intensity and buy in.
Well, the question is, the Thunder just match everything.
The Thunder will match. Right? The Thunder will match. The question is how much they have to match to. I think that Brooklyn gets in on it. I think that a team like, again, maybe Orlando gets in on it. I think that Miami might throw a real low ball offer out there. And pair two of the Justice Winslow and Andre Robertson. One of them will end up making a three at some point. And I think Oklahoma City has no choice but to match. So I think ultimately that's what happens. I think it's probably around $10 million a year.
Yeah. Nick Mirotic is in an interesting case to me. I don't really know how to handle his free agency. Has been benched at times by Fred Hoiberg. Has looked really good under Fred Hoiberg as well. Chicago's obviously going to be looking to eat up minutes, I would say. Do you think he is a player that another team will try and value?
Value, no. Another team will put in there will be teams that will put in real nice offer sheets for him. I think that he could pull. It's tough because it's a 2+1. I mean, this is a guy who really would like to have a make good deal, a 1 year or 1+1, where he could get $20 million, for 1 year, just see if it works. I have a very hard time putting a valuation on him because the Bulls clearly don't value him. But everything else says this guy should be making $17, $18, $19 million a year just with his skill set, and especially with the desire around the league for guys of that skill set, defense be damned. I think whoever misses out on Gallinari ultimately, given how that works with Gallinari being a UFA and that with Mirotic being an RFA and that not really being able to activate until after the moratorium is over, I think whoever loses out on Gallinari is probably going to make a nice bid. A little less, obviously, pretty significantly less, actually, possibly, for Mirotic. And I don't think that the Bulls bother matching.
Yeah. Another set of wings that is really interesting to me, Tony Snell, Jonathan Simmons, and I had not really a wing, but JaMychal Green as well as stretch forward, kind of guy that has taken that next step. I think all of those guys get over 8 figures pretty easily.
Okay.
Jonathan Simmons is one of the most interesting cases because he is going to be subject to the Arenas rule, given the fact that he is still within 2 years of his NBA debut. JaMychal Green, not subject to said rule. Tony Snell, obviously not subject to said rule, is a former first-round pick. Tony Snell probably gets something like $14 million, I would guess, given his playoff performance. Jonathan Simmons, I don't know what to do necessarily because he can get $8 million, and then, some sort of undetermined number at this stage.
And you're operating against the Spurs, who probably have, some strange loophole figured out with Jonathan Simmons on the side so that, you end up giving up a second-round pick in case you make a bid on him.
Yeah. And then JaMychal Green, again, has turned into a really effective defender who can knock down threes. Those guys get $10, $12 million a year. And
I think JaMychal Green could get a lot of money.
He should. He's a really good player.
If I'm Brooklyn, I throw the house at him. Or if I'm Philly, even, I could put some real money on him. And because I not only think that he's a present day, player, I really like the way he projects out. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy everyone's like, oh, he got this money, and if that totally pans out for everybody.
Yeah, Joe Ingles is another guy that I think is just going to be matched with whatever anyone throws at him.
Utah has no choice, especially if they lose Hayward and Hill. Like, they can't lose Ingles. They have nothing. Yeah. They have nothing if they lose Ingles.
Yeah. Bojan Bogdanovic, again, Washington in a situation to match everything, in my opinion. Just went out and traded a first-round pick for him. Interesting player, useful offensive player to be sure.
His brother just got paid so much money. I mean, doesn't that set the market for the other one?
Not his brother.
That's not his brother? There's just Bogdanoviches laying around everywhere?
I will tell you, they're not only not brothers, they're from different countries.
Whoa. I feel very xenophobic right now. Accidental xenophobe.
Yeah, Bojan is from Croatia, Bogdan is from Serbia.
I'm mixing up my Baltic states, and I'm just, I deserve to hear about it.
Also, shout out Bogdan Bogdanovic, 3 years, $36 million, most expensive.
I thought that went down to 27. I thought that went down to 27 today.
Did it?
Yeah, I don't think it's 36, because that would have been outrageous.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know if he's worth that necessarily, but he's really good.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, he's probably the highest paid player on the Kings right now. But, yeah, I mean, coming into the NBA 3 years, 36, that's something different.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that I will tell my listeners that they have to remember is that European money is very different from American money because a lot of it is untaxed. Right. European teams also pay for housing, transportation, food, everything else that goes into the lifestyle of a European basketball player. Mm-hmm. It's the rule of thumb for a lot of guys is double it. What they're making in Europe, and that is the amount of money that they have to get in America to really match it. Bogdanovic, there are some different, like once you get up to where he was making, I believe he was somewhere between like $4 and $5 million a year at Fenerbahce, I believe he was at in Turkey. It's not, I don't think you're necessarily doubling it that high of a price, but you do have to remember all of the differences in terms of what teams provide for you as a free agent or as a player, really. I don't really care about any of these other unrestricted free agents. I will bring up JJ Redick. JJ Redick for me is in a really interesting spot here. Certainly not going to return to the Los Angeles Clippers. I would imagine that he is going to end up on some sort of contender. I just don't know where. I
think Brooklyn's the place, actually.
I just can't. He is such a wild competitor that I can't see that.
I think maybe I'm just read too much into the moment, but I was there when the Clippers lost that Game 7 to the Jazz, and he was very candid that he felt like that was their last shot, and I think that he's probably spent up until that Chris Paul trade, which now can only confirm it, spent a lot of time thinking about how that window is closed for them. And
I don't think he's returning there.
No, but in the sense of, talking himself into shit, let's just get paid. I mean, this is a guy who hasn't gotten paid and certainly is deserving of it. So he's a tricky one. because, I mean, he could even go ahead and just take the minimum to play for a winning team somewhere. But I ultimately think that the lack of money in his career lends itself to taking big money somewhere. And I think Brooklyn throws it at him because he could put some hipsters in the seats.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where he ends up. He's in a really interesting spot. James Johnson, also in a really interesting spot, had a monster year in Miami. Dion Waiters as well, monster year in Miami. Both those guys should be in line for pretty decent paydays. But we've mentioned a lot of players already that we figure are going to get upwards of 8 figures, and it's hard for me to see them all getting 8 figures.
Yeah, this market's going to, I mentioned this before, this market's going to dry up pretty fast, and I think these are the guys who are going to end up getting the shaft on that one. Ultimately, I think Johnson goes back to Miami. Might be a little tough for them to make it all fit, depending on what it is they do, and especially if they end up landing Blake Griffin, then that changes the paradigm entirely. But
if I'm James Johnson, if I'm Houston, I'm offering James Johnson the mid-level and saying,
yeah, that might actually do it at that juncture.
I don't know if it's going to do it. I think that there's a good chance he gets 12 on this market instead of 8. But I just don't I don't know. There are just so many guys on this market that are in his tier. They don't necessarily bring his skill set, but they're in his kind of parameter, and he has no real track record of success beyond this year. It's hard for me to really figure out what his market looks like. Does he get 4 years? Does he get 2 years at a big dollar figure? What his market is fascinating to me. Dion Waiters, I have no idea. I have no idea what he is going to get.
I can say that Danny LaRue and Nate Duncan, they do their wonderful mock off-season podcast, which is really a must listen, and they shot out Waiters to the Mavericks, which of course is just a tantalizing concept, but he could go anywhere. I mean, he could end up on the Bulls.
Why would you do that to Rick Carlisle? Why would you give him both Dennis Smith and Dion Waiters?
Because we're going to test how much of a genius Rick Carlisle actually is. If this man can survive that, he truly is the NBA's best coach that no one ever talks about in that vein.
And I love Dennis Smith. I love the skill set. He's also headstrong. This is
and apparently other kinds of strong.
Oh man. I love it. The last guy I want to talk about before I get into the round of jokes here. Patrick Patterson is interesting to me as a stretch 4 option for a lot of teams that miss out on the James Johnson boat, or that miss out on the Paul Millsap boat.
Or the Serge Ibaka boat.
Serge Ibaka. Well, Serge is a 5 now.
It's a different beast, but of that vein, or the Kelly Olynyk boat, or anyone who's going to play a lot of teams want a big man who can stretch the floor.
Yeah,
and
especially one who can defend as well.
Right, Patrick Patterson. I think Patrick Patterson could, if he gets in on this early, as he can, there could be a nice market for him, because he's a hell of a player. I have ultimately no earthly concept of where he ends up. Where are you thinking?
I really don't know. That again fits to me.
This is the insight that you can only get on the game theory, everybody.
I know. He's again though a guy that really fits to me in Houston, right? You give him.
That'd be great.
What?
That'd be great if you give him the mid-level exception. I don't know if 8.5 is enticing enough to a player of his skill set, but
again, not all of these guys are going to get paid. There's just not enough money on the market for me to see them all getting paid. So.
Well, one of the problems that I think we have with these mock off seasons is, or whatever it is we do here, where we project out and do it, is, we all, there's a baseline presumption that all of these guys are hell bent on winning and necessarily want to go play for the best team. Some guys just want the damn paycheck.
Yeah.
In fact, way more than anyone in the NBA or any sport wants to admit. They're just in it for the money. This is a job for them. And they don't give a shit if they, it sucks to win 25 games, and they would much rather be in the playoffs and competing for championships every year. But they would much, much rather have 25 million in the bank than and they'll suck it up and win 25 games. So ultimately, it's a hard read on every one of these guys on what their priorities are. And well, I totally agree. Not everyone's going to get paid. Some guys are going to get paid just because they're willing to overlook a lot of fatal flaws for a lot of teams. The Knicks have money to spend, and I know that they want to hold on to a lot of that money so that they're more flexible going forward, but they're going to have to spend a little of it. And, some guys just, I'll go right into a toxic environment and live in New York City and, enjoy a year or two, even though it'll probably kill me. I'll take their money. There's always going to be someone who will take the money, and there's always going to be money out there because eventually, the Rockets run out of cash and the Warriors are out of cash, and all these teams that everyone considers contenders, they run out of cash, and you're really much left with crap teams. So who has the most cash?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Well, Dieter, Nicki Minaj just shouted out Brad Wing in a tweet, so I think it's about time for us to end.
Wow, is it the year 2042 already?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Shout out Brad Wing. I remember that fake punt at LSU.
What the fuck is that about? Can you contextually explain? I don't want to log on to Twitter and find out. Can you contextually explain how the fuck that came to pass?
Not really. just not really. She tweeted out some sort of lyric and said Brad Wing the punt. And I don't know what to tell you, man.
God bless this country.
I love America. Thank you for Dieter for coming on. Please tell the people where they can find your work.
Internet. Everywhere. I mean, nowhere and anywhere. I mean, I'll post everything I got on my Twitter at D Kurtenbach, DKURTENBACH. Going on a bit of a vacation here. I'm going to enjoy some, I guess, unemployment, whatever the hell we're going to call this, and then get right back into the thick of things with a bunch of ideas and stuff, and try out some stuff for the hashtag brand. So keep an eye on that at my Twitter account and my Facebook account, and I'm sure some other accounts that will come up in the near future.
I could play that off as like me making a joke, but really I'm just on such autopilot because it's 11 o'clock. I've been out watching Tom Crean coach basketball all day, and Nicki Minaj threw me with that Brad Wing tweet.
Listen, we've been talking for 2 hours now, both most of it on, but some of it off. There's a certain threshold of every person for any other person. You can only discuss James Johnson options for so long. Like it's, I think we've reached the end, and it's been a ridiculous 90 minutes or plus, and what's another moment of ridiculousness?
Yeah, I don't think we can get into the James Jones free agency.
Well, the non-existent James. I mean, James. I don't think that. I think that James Jones is very similar to Milton from Office Space, where he just keeps showing up to the Cleveland Cavaliers every year, and eventually they'll just correct the payroll.
Yeah, that seems about right. Dieter, thanks for coming on. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, anywhere that you can get podcasts. We're up on right now. I really appreciate you guys leaving ratings and reviews and everything like that. If you would continue to do it, that would be fantastic. I would really, again, appreciate that deeply. Shout out Tom Crean for giving me a lot of things to do today. Go out and seeing all of these high school kids. And always, Tom Crean deserves shout outs. The internet's favorite basketball coach, folks. Thank you all for listening again this week. We'll be back on Monday, hopefully with some free agency signings to discuss after the moratorium ends. I believe on Monday, actually. I think they have shortened it to 3 days now. So we'll be back then. We'll talk then. And hopefully we'll have something going on. Maybe Friday night. Who knows? Until next time, though, we'll talk soon. Bye.